I never thought I would wake up one morning and realize my husband of 32 years was trying to erase me from my own life. The pill he handed me yesterday wasn't for my health, and when I looked into his eyes as he pressed that glass of water into my trembling hand, I saw a stranger staring back at me. Before I go any further, I need to ask you something personal. What I'm about to share isn't easy for me to say out loud, and frankly, it's the kind of story most people keep buried forever. But if my words can reach even one person who feels trapped the way I did, then breaking my silence is worth it. So please, if this story touches you, if it reminds you of someone you love, or even yourself, leave a like and subscribe. These stories need to travel farther than my voice can carry them alone. Someone out there is waiting to hear they're not crazy, they're not alone, and they're not powerless. Let's make sure they find this message. My name is Margaret, and I live in a modest 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood just outside Chicago. The kind of place where maple trees line the sidewalks and neighbors still wave at each other from their porches. I used to love this house. I picked out every piece of furniture, planted every rose bush in the front garden, and painted the kitchen walls that soft yellow color that catches the morning sun just right. But lately, these walls feel like they're closing in on me. The house that once felt like home now feels like a cage, and the man I share it with has become the warden. It started small, so small I didn't even notice at first. Robert, my husband, began making little comments about my memory. I'd misplaced my reading glasses, and he'd sigh heavily, shaking his head like I'd just announced I couldn't remember my own name. One evening last fall, I forgot to pick up his dry cleaning, and he sat me down at the kitchen table with this concerned look on his face. He took my hands in his voice dripping with false compassion, and said, "Margaret, I'm worried about you. This forgetfulness is getting worse." I laughed it off, told him everyone forgets things now and then, but he didn't laugh with me. He just stared, his expression grave, like he was watching me slip away right in front of him. Then the comments became more frequent, more pointed. He'd tell me I'd said things I had no memory of saying. He'd insist I'd made plans I never made, agreed to things I never agreed to. I started doubting myself. Maybe I was forgetting more than I realized. Maybe there was something wrong with me. After all, I'm 64 years old. Isn't that when these things start to happen? He began sharing his concerns with others. First, it was his brother, Carl, who visited one Sunday afternoon. I overheard them talking in the living room while I was making tea. Robert's voice was low, confidential. "She's not herself anymore, Carl. Just yesterday, she couldn't remember where she put her purse. I found it in the refrigerator. For God's sake." I froze, the kettle trembling in my hand. I'd never put my purse in the refrigerator. I'd never done anything like that. But Carl's response was sympathetic, understanding. "That's tough, Robert. Must be hard on you." The betrayal of that moment cut deeper than any knife. Next, it was our neighbors, the Hendersons. I ran into Linda Henderson at the grocery store, and she looked at me with such pity it made my skin crawl. "Margaret, dear, Robert told us about your struggles. If there's anything we can do to help." I stood there in the cereal aisle, clutching my shopping cart, feeling like the ground was crumbling beneath my feet. What had he told them? What lies had he spread? Linda patted my arm like I was a child, and I wanted to scream that I was fine, that nothing was wrong with me, but the words stuck in my throat. Even our daughter Susan started treating me differently. She lives in Seattle with her husband and 2 kids, and we used to talk on the phone every week. But after Robert got to her, those calls changed. Her voice became careful, measured, like she was talking to someone fragile. "Mom, Dad says you've been having a hard time. Are you taking care of yourself?" The worst part was the doubt I heard in her voice. She believed him. My own daughter believed I was losing my mind. I tried to defend myself, to prove I was still sharp, still capable. I'd make elaborate dinners to show I could follow complex recipes. I'd organize the entire house, labeling everything, keeping meticulous lists. But Robert would just smile indulgently, like my efforts were sweet but ultimately meaningless. "You don't have to prove anything to me, Margaret," he'd say, his hand on my shoulder feeling more like a weight than comfort. I know this is hard for you to accept, but you need help. We both need help. The gaslighting was so subtle, so insidious, that I started to believe him. I started to think maybe there was something wrong with me. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was going crazy and just couldn't see it. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if tomorrow would be the day I really did start forgetting everything. The fear became a constant companion, a shadow that followed me through every room of that house. And through it all, Robert played the role of the devoted, suffering husband to perfection. He'd tell anyone who would listen about the burden he was carrying, the toll it was taking on him to watch his wife deteriorate. People praised him for his patience, his dedication. The church ladies brought him casseroles. His coworkers offered him sympathy and support. He was the hero of this twisted narrative, and I was the tragic figure slowly fading away. But I wasn't fading. I was being erased, deliberately, systematically, and I didn't even realize it was happening until it was almost too late. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon in early March. I was cleaning out the kitchen drawers, something I'd been meaning to do for weeks. Robert was at work, or so I thought. I pulled out the junk drawer, that catch-all space where we tossed everything that didn't have a proper home. Old pens, rubber bands, expired coupons, takeout menus. And there, wedged between a stack of unpaid bills and a broken flashlight, was Robert's phone. He must have forgotten it that morning. I picked it up, intending to text him and let him know, when the screen lit up with a new message. It was from Carl. "Did you talk to the lawyer about the power of attorney? We need to move fast before she catches on." My heart stopped. The drawer slipped from my hands, scattering its contents across the kitchen floor. Pens rolled under the cabinets. Papers fluttered like wounded birds. But I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just stood there, staring at those words, reading them over and over until they burned into my brain. Power of attorney. Move fast. Before she catches on. This wasn't about my health. This wasn't about concern or care or love. This was about control. This was about taking everything from me while making everyone believe it was for my own good. I unlocked the phone. I knew his passcode because we'd never hidden anything from each other. Or so I'd thought. I scrolled through his messages, each one a dagger to the heart. There were dozens of conversations with Carl, with our lawyer, with Susan. They were planning to have me declared mentally incompetent. They were planning to move me into a nursing home. They were planning to take control of our finances, our house, everything we'd built together over 3 decades of marriage. And the money. Oh God, the money. Robert had been siphoning funds from our joint account for months. Small amounts at first, then larger and larger sums. Tens of thousands of dollars. Gone. Transferred to accounts I didn't even know existed. Our retirement savings, the nest egg we'd built so carefully, was disappearing right under my nose. I found emails to nursing homes, inquiries about availability and costs. I found a draft letter to our insurance company requesting coverage for long-term care. I found a document titled Margaret's Decline, a detailed fabrication of symptoms and incidents that had never happened. He'd been building a case against me, creating a paper trail of my supposed deterioration, all to justify locking me away. My hands were shaking so violently I nearly dropped the phone. I sank onto the kitchen floor, my back against the cabinets, surrounded by the debris from the drawer. The tears came then, hot and bitter, streaming down my face. How long had this been going on? How long had he been planning to get rid of me? And why? What had I done to deserve this? We'd met in college, 2 kids from working-class families trying to make something of ourselves. He'd been so charming back then, so attentive. We'd built a life together. We'd raised a daughter together. We'd weathered job losses and health scares and family deaths together. Or at least I thought we had. Now I realized I'd been living with a stranger all along. The man I'd loved, the man I'd trusted with everything, had been plotting my destruction for months, maybe years. I don't know how long I sat there on that cold kitchen floor. The sun moved across the room, shadows lengthening, and still I couldn't move. I felt paralyzed, frozen by the magnitude of the betrayal. This wasn't just about money or property. This was about my identity, my autonomy, my very existence. He was trying to erase me, to turn me into a non-person, someone who could be dismissed and discarded and forgotten. The sun was setting when I finally pulled myself together. I gathered up the scattered contents of the drawer, my movements mechanical, automatic. I put Robert's phone back exactly where I'd found it. I couldn't let him know I knew. Not yet. I needed time to think, to plan, to figure out how to protect myself. That night, Robert came home with Chinese takeout and a bouquet of cheap grocery store flowers. He kissed my cheek, asked about my day, acted like everything was normal. I played along, smiling and chatting, all while my mind raced with the knowledge of his betrayal. We ate dinner at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared thousands of meals over the years, and I wondered how many of those meals he'd spent plotting against me. After dinner, I excused myself to take a bath. I needed to be alone, to process everything I'd learned. I filled the tub with hot water and lavender bath salts, sank beneath the surface, and let myself cry. The water muffled my sobs, turning them into something small and pitiful. I felt so stupid, so naive. How had I not seen this coming? What kind of fool was I to trust him so completely? When I finally emerged from the bathroom, wrinkled and red-eyed, Robert was waiting in the bedroom. He had that concerned look on his face again, the one that had fooled me for so long. "Margaret, I've been thinking, maybe you should see a doctor, just to rule anything out, for peace of mind." I wanted to laugh at the audacity of it. Instead, I nodded meekly, playing the part of the worried wife. "If you think it's best, dear." He smiled, satisfied, and kissed my forehead. "It's for the best. I just want to take care of you." The irony was almost too much to bear. Take care of me, by drugging me and locking me away, by stealing my money and my freedom, by destroying my reputation and turning everyone I loved against me. That was his idea of care. I spent the next several days in a fog of shock and grief. But beneath the pain, something else was growing. Anger. Hot, righteous anger that burned away the self-doubt and fear he'd so carefully cultivated. I wasn't losing my mind. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't weak. I was a woman who'd been lied to and manipulated and betrayed, but I was still here. I was still fighting, and I wasn't going down without a fight. The turning point came exactly 1 week after I'd found that phone. It was a Thursday morning, crisp and clear, the kind of spring day that makes you believe in new beginnings. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my morning coffee when Robert came downstairs. He had a glass of water in one hand and a small white pill in the other. "Your anxiety medication?" he said, his voice cheerful, casual. "The doctor prescribed it to help you relax." I stared at that pill. We both knew I'd never seen a doctor. We both knew there was no prescription. This was it. This was the moment he'd been building toward. Once I started taking whatever was in that pill, once I was truly impaired, he could move forward with his plans. I'd be the confused, medicated wife who couldn't care for herself, the perfect victim. My hand reached out, trembling, and took the glass. Robert smiled, encouraging, expectant. I raised the glass to my lips, and then, without warning, my fingers opened. The glass fell, shattering on the kitchen floor, water and broken glass spreading across the tiles like a crime scene. "I'm so sorry," I said, my voice shaking. "How clumsy of me." Robert's expression flickered just for a moment. Annoyance, frustration, then the concerned mask slipped back into place. "It's okay, Margaret. I'll get you another glass." "No," I said, the word coming out stronger than I intended. "No, I don't think I need it after all. I'm feeling much better today." He insisted. Of course he insisted. But I held firm, and eventually he gave up, sweeping up the broken glass with barely concealed irritation. I sat at that table, my heart pounding, knowing I'd just crossed a line. I'd defied him. I'd said no. And there was no going back now. That afternoon, while Robert was at work, I made a decision. I couldn't do this alone. I needed help, but I couldn't trust anyone in my immediate circle. Robert had poisoned them all against me. I needed someone outside, someone who could see the situation clearly, someone who loved me unconditionally. I called my granddaughter, Emma. She's 16, sharp as a tack, with her mother's stubbornness and, I'd like to think, a bit of my spirit. We'd always been close, even with the distance between Chicago and Seattle. I'd visit when I could, and we'd spend hours talking about everything and nothing. She was the one person Robert hadn't managed to corrupt, maybe because he'd underestimated her, dismissed her as just a kid. "Grandma?" Her voice was bright, excited. "I was just thinking about you. How are you?" I almost broke down right then. The genuine warmth in her voice, the lack of pity or condescension, was almost too much. "Emma, sweetheart, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully." Over the next hour, I told her everything: the gaslighting, the lies, the phone messages, the pill. I half expected her to think I was paranoid, to side with her grandfather. But Emma had always been perceptive, and she'd seen things the adults had missed. She'd noticed how Robert spoke to me, how he dismissed my opinions, how he controlled every aspect of our lives. She'd questioned it before, but her mother had brushed her concerns aside. "I knew something was wrong," Emma said, her voice tight with anger. "Mom wouldn't listen when I tried to talk to her about it. She said Grandpa was just stressed, that you were getting older and needed more help. But I knew it wasn't right. The way he talks to you, Grandma, it's not okay." Hearing her validate my experience, acknowledge that what was happening to me was real and wrong, gave me strength I didn't know I had. "I need your help, Emma. I need evidence. I need people to believe me." "We'll get them to believe you," she said fiercely. "I promise, Grandma. We're going to fix this." Emma became my ally, my co-conspirator. She started documenting everything, keeping detailed notes of our conversations. She recorded phone calls with her mother, gently probing about what Robert had been telling her, what claims he was making about my mental state. She researched elder abuse, financial exploitation, conservatorship laws. For a 16-year-old, she was remarkably thorough. Meanwhile, I began my own investigation. I opened a separate bank account Robert didn't know about, transferring small amounts of money each week. I made copies of important documents, our marriage certificate, property deeds, insurance policies. I started keeping a journal, writing down everything that happened each day. Every lie Robert told, every manipulation, every attempt to undermine me. I documented the pill incident, the concerned looks, the conversations with neighbors and family. I also started researching nursing homes, the same ones Robert had contacted. I called them, pretending to be inquiring for a friend, and asked about their admission processes. What I learned chilled me to the bone. Several of them had notes about me in their systems, preliminary inquiries made months ago. Robert had been planning this for a long time, laying the groundwork, making sure everything would be in place when he was ready to move. The anger sustained me through those weeks. Every time I felt weak, every time I questioned whether I was overreacting, I'd remember that pill, that glass of water, the casual way he'd tried to drug me. I'd remember the messages about moving fast before I caught on. I'd remember the money he'd stolen, the lies he'd told, the life he was trying to steal from me. I also started reaching out to old friends, people I'd lost touch with over the years. Robert had always discouraged me from maintaining close friendships, claiming they were a waste of time, that family should be enough. Now I realized it had been another form of isolation, another way to control me. I reconnected with my college roommate Linda, who'd moved to Phoenix after graduation. I reached out to my former coworkers from the library where I'd worked before retiring. I joined a book club at the local community center. These connections reminded me of who I was outside of my marriage. I was Margaret Thornton, a woman with interests and opinions and value beyond being someone's wife. I'd earned a degree in English literature. I'd worked for 20 years helping people find books that would change their lives. I'd raised a daughter, mostly on my own while Robert focused on his career. I'd survived breast cancer, bearing my mother, and countless other challenges. I was not weak. I was not helpless. And I sure as hell was not going to let this man destroy me. But even as I gathered evidence and built my support network, I struggled with doubt. Not about whether Robert was betraying me, the evidence was irrefutable, but about my own judgment. How had I missed the signs for so long? How had I let him manipulate me so thoroughly? The shame of it was almost worse than the betrayal itself. I felt like a fool, a naive old woman who'd been played for years. Emma helped me work through those feelings during our late-night phone calls. "Grandma, this isn't your fault. He's good at this. He's been practicing on you for decades. You're not stupid for trusting your husband. That's what you're supposed to do in a marriage. He's the one who broke that trust, not you." Her words helped, but the wound ran deep. I'd look at Robert across the dinner table and wonder who he really was. Had he ever loved me? Had any of it been real? Or had I been nothing more than a means to an end from the very beginning? The man I'd built a life with was a stranger, and I was mourning not just the loss of my marriage, but the loss of my entire history. Every memory was now tainted, every happy moment called into question. The financial aspect was particularly devastating. Robert had been the primary breadwinner throughout our marriage. Working as a financial advisor, the irony wasn't lost on me. I'd worked part-time at the library until our daughter was in high school, then full-time until I retired at 60. But Robert had always handled our finances. He'd insisted on it, claimed it was his area of expertise, that I shouldn't worry my pretty little head about such things. I'd trusted him? Why wouldn't I? He was my husband. Now I discovered just how much that trust had cost me. Not only had he been stealing from our joint accounts, but he'd also cashed out my retirement fund without my knowledge. My 401k, which should have had close to $200,000, was nearly empty. He'd forged my signature on withdrawal forms, claiming medical expenses. The money was gone, transferred to accounts I couldn't access, spent on God knows what. Our house, which we'd bought 30 years ago and should have been paid off, had a new mortgage on it. Robert had refinanced, taking out equity, and the money had disappeared into the same black hole as everything else. I felt sick when I discovered the extent of the theft. This wasn't just about control or convenience. This was about wealth, about securing his future at the expense of mine. Once I was locked away in a nursing home, he'd have complete access to everything. He could sell the house, liquidate our assets, and live comfortably while I rotted in some institution, drugged and compliant. The realization that he'd been planning this for years, systematically stealing from me while pretending to be the devoted husband, was almost more than I could bear. I'd lie awake at night, doing the math in my head, calculating how much he'd taken, how much I'd lost. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, money we'd saved together, money I'd earned through years of hard work, gone. My financial security, my independence, my future, all stolen by the man who'd promised to love and cherish me until death do us part. But alongside the grief and anger, something else was growing. Determination. A stubborn refusal to let him win. He thought I was weak, that I was stupid, that I'd go quietly into whatever prison he'd prepared for me, but he'd underestimated me. He'd forgotten that I was the woman who'd fought breast cancer and won, the woman who'd raised a child while working full-time and managing a household, the woman who'd survived losing both parents within 6 months of each other and kept going. I was stronger than he knew, and I was going to prove it. Emma and I worked out a plan. We'd wait until we had enough evidence, enough documentation, then we'd strike. We'd expose Robert for what he was, in front of everyone, in a way that couldn't be denied or explained away. It would be public, it would be devastating, and it would be final. But we had to be patient. We had to be careful. One wrong move, and Robert could accelerate his plans, have me committed before I could defend myself. Those weeks of waiting were torture. Every day I had to pretend everything was normal. I had to smile at Robert over breakfast, thank him for his concern, act like the confused, forgetful wife he was painting me as. I had to endure his touches, his kisses, his false affection, all while knowing exactly what he was planning. It took every ounce of strength I had not to confront him, not to scream the truth in his face. There were moments when I almost broke. One evening, he came home with flowers and my favorite chocolates. He'd made a reservation at the Italian restaurant where we'd had our first date. Over candlelight and wine, he talked about our future, about growing old together, about how much he loved me. The performance was so convincing that for a moment, just a moment, I wanted to believe it was real. I wanted to believe the nightmare was over, that I'd imagined it all, that the man across from me was actually the husband I'd loved for 32 years. But then he reached across the table, took my hand, and said, "Margaret, I know things have been difficult lately, your memory issues, your confusion, but I want you to know that I'll take care of you, no matter what, even if we have to make some hard decisions about your care." And just like that, the spell was broken. This wasn't romance. This was manipulation. He was setting the stage for the next act of his terrible play. I smiled, squeezed his hand, and said, "Thank you, Robert. I don't know what I'd do without you." The lie tasted like ash in my mouth, but I swallowed it down with my wine and played the part he expected. And all the while, I thought about the evidence Emma and I were gathering, the case we were building, the reckoning that was coming. The confrontation happened sooner than we'd planned, but in a way that worked perfectly for our purposes. Robert's niece was having her 40th birthday party, a big celebration at a rented event space downtown. The whole family would be there, all the people Robert had lied to, all the people who thought I was losing my mind and pitied him for having to deal with me. Emma flew in from Seattle, supposedly just to attend the party. But she arrived 2 days early and stayed with me while Robert was at work. We went over our plan, rehearsed what we'd say, made sure all our evidence was in order. Emma had created a folder on her laptop with copies of everything: the forged signatures, the bank statements showing the missing money, the messages about power of attorney and nursing homes. We had recordings of phone conversations where Robert contradicted himself, claiming I'd done things that never happened. We had statements from my doctors confirming I was in perfect health, with no signs of dementia or cognitive decline. The night of the party, I dressed carefully. I wore the navy blue dress I'd bought for Susan's wedding, paired with the pearl earrings Robert had given me on our 20th anniversary. I did my makeup, fixed my hair, made sure I looked polished and put together. I wanted everyone to see that I was not the confused, deteriorating woman Robert had described. I was sharp, I was present, and I was done being silent. Robert seemed pleased with how I looked, which made my skin crawl. "You look beautiful, Margaret," he said, kissing my cheek. "I'm glad you're feeling up to going out tonight. I know these big family events can be overwhelming for you." I smiled sweetly. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The party was already in full swing when we arrived. The event space was decorated with balloons and streamers, a DJ playing music in the corner, tables laden with food and drinks. Family members crowded around, talking and laughing, the noise almost overwhelming. Robert immediately started his performance, his hand on my elbow, guiding me through the crowd like I might wander off and get lost. "She's having a good day today," I heard him say to his sister. "The new medication seems to be helping." I gritted my teeth and kept smiling. Emma caught my eye from across the room and gave me a small nod. It was time. I walked to the center of the room, where the birthday cake was displayed on a table. Emma followed me, carrying her laptop. I picked up a spoon and tapped it against a glass, the sharp ringing cutting through the noise. The room gradually fell silent, everyone turning to look at me. Robert's face went pale. "Margaret, what are you doing?" I ignored him, addressing the room instead. "I'm sorry to interrupt the celebration, but I have something important to say. I know many of you have been worried about me lately. My husband has told you I'm suffering from memory loss, confusion, possibly even dementia." Uncomfortable murmurs rippled through the crowd. I saw pity on some faces, concern on others. Robert stepped forward, his hand reaching for me. "Margaret, honey, maybe we should—" "I'm not finished," I said, my voice stronger now. "The truth is, there's nothing wrong with my memory. There's nothing wrong with my mind. But there is something very wrong with this marriage." The room went dead silent. Emma opened her laptop, pulling up the files we'd prepared. "What you're about to hear might be difficult to believe," I continued. "It was difficult for me to believe, and I lived through it. But I have proof. Documented proof of lies, manipulation, financial theft, and a plan to have me committed to a nursing home against my will." I saw Robert's mask crack. genuine fear flashing across his face. He tried to speak, to interrupt, but Emma was already speaking, reading from the messages we'd found. "Did you talk to the lawyer about the power of attorney? We need to move fast before she catches on." Carl, Robert's brother, turned bright red. Several people gasped. Emma continued, pulling up bank statements, showing the money that had been transferred out of my accounts. She showed the forged signatures, the communications with nursing homes, the fabricated medical history Robert had created. With each piece of evidence, the room grew more tense, more uncomfortable. People were starting to look at Robert not with sympathy, but with suspicion and disgust. "This is ridiculous," Robert sputtered. "Margaret, you're clearly having an episode. Everyone, I'm so sorry. She's been under a lot of stress." "No," I said firmly. "I'm not having an episode. I'm telling the truth, and I have medical records to prove it." I pulled out the letters from my doctors, recent evaluations showing I was in excellent mental health. There is nothing wrong with me, but my husband has been telling everyone I'm losing my mind so he can steal my money and lock me away. The room erupted. Family members started shouting questions, demanding explanations. Carl tried to defend Robert, but Emma had recordings of their conversations, proof that he'd been complicit in the plan. Susan, my daughter, stood frozen, tears streaming down her face as she realized the magnitude of what her father had done. Robert made one last attempt to control the narrative. "You're all being manipulated by a sick woman. She's paranoid, delusional." "Then explain the missing money," I said quietly. "Explain the forged signatures. Explain the messages about moving fast before I caught on. Explain the pill you tried to give me last week, the one that was supposed to be medication but wasn't prescribed by any doctor." He had no explanation. His face went from red to white to gray as his lies crumbled around him. People were already pulling out their phones, calling lawyers, talking about police reports and investigations. The perfect facade he'd built, the image of the devoted husband caring for his ailing wife, was destroyed in minutes. But even in victory, I felt no joy. Just exhaustion and a deep, aching sadness for all the years I'd lost to this man's deception. Susan came to me, sobbing, apologizing for not believing me sooner. Other family members approached, ashamed of how easily they'd been fooled, angry at Robert for his betrayal. And through it all, Robert stood alone in the center of the room, isolated by his own actions, finally seeing the consequences of his cruelty. The party ended abruptly. People left in small groups, whispering among themselves, looking back at Robert with contempt. Emma stayed close to me, her hand in mine, giving me strength. When we finally left, Robert tried to follow, but I turned to face him one last time. "Don't come home tonight," I said. "Don't come home at all. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow, and I'm pressing charges for fraud and elder abuse. You're done, Robert. You'll never control me again." His face twisted with rage and desperation. "You'll regret this, Margaret. You need me. You can't manage on your own." I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing but pity. "I've been managing on my own for years, Robert. I just didn't realize it. Goodbye." Emma and I walked out into the cool night air, leaving Robert standing alone in that empty event space. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I could breathe. The legal battle that followed was brutal. Robert hired expensive lawyers and tried every trick in the book to paint me as the unstable one. But with Emma's help and the support of family members who'd finally seen the truth, we had more than enough evidence to counter his claims. The forged signatures alone were enough to bring criminal charges. The financial fraud added years to his potential sentence. His reputation, which he'd valued above everything else, was destroyed. Word spread quickly through his professional network about what he'd done. His financial advising business collapsed as clients withdrew in disgust. His brother Carl faced his own consequences, losing his position on the board of a nonprofit when his role in the scheme became public. The family that had once rallied around Robert, pitying him for his burden, now shunned him completely. The divorce proceedings revealed even more shocking truths. Robert had a gambling problem he'd hidden for years, racking up massive debts he'd been paying off with our stolen money. He'd maxed out credit cards in my name, cards I didn't even know existed. The full scope of his financial irresponsibility was staggering. It turned out the nursing home wasn't just about control, it was about hiding his failures and securing his future at my expense. But even knowing all this, even seeing him exposed and punished, I struggled with feelings of betrayal and loss. This wasn't just about money or freedom. It was about 32 years of my life built on lies. I'd trusted this man with everything, and he'd used that trust to exploit me. The grief was overwhelming at times, mourning not just the end of my marriage, but the death of my entire history. Emma spent weeks with me, helping me sort through the wreckage. We went through old photo albums, and I told her stories about her mother's childhood, about the early years of my marriage when I'd still believed Robert loved me. Some photos we kept, others we threw away, but all of them we looked at with new eyes, seeing the cracks that had always been there if only I'd known to look. "Do you regret marrying him?" Emma asked one evening as we sat in the kitchen drinking tea. I thought about it carefully. I regret what he became, what he did to me. But I don't regret Susan. I don't regret you. And I don't regret the woman I was before I let him make me doubt myself. That woman was strong and smart and capable. I just forgot for a while. The financial recovery took months. My lawyer, a fierce woman named Patricia Hayes, fought to reclaim every penny Robert had stolen. We got most of it back, though not all. Some of the money was simply gone, lost to Robert's gambling debts and poor investments. But we salvaged enough that I wouldn't have to worry about my future, and Patricia was confident we'd win a judgment for the rest. More important than the money was reclaiming my identity. I changed all my passwords, took Robert's name off every account, updated my will and power of attorney documents to ensure he could never touch my assets again. I met with financial advisors, learned to manage my own investments, took control of every aspect of my financial life. It was empowering in a way I'd never experienced, making decisions without needing to consult or defer to someone else. I also started therapy. The gaslighting had done more damage than I'd realized, creating deep wells of self-doubt and insecurity. My therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen, helped me work through the trauma, identifying the patterns of abuse that had been present throughout my marriage. She helped me understand that what Robert did was deliberate, calculated, and not my fault. She helped me forgive myself for not seeing it sooner. Through therapy, I learned about elder financial abuse, a crime that affects millions of older adults every year. Studies show that in 15% of cases, family members borrow money and never return it, often with the victim's trust making them easy targets. I learned about the warning signs I'd missed, the red flags that seemed obvious in hindsight. I learned that predators like Robert specifically target people like me, trusting spouses with assets and a tendency to put family first. Armed with this knowledge, I started speaking out. I gave a talk at the community center about my experience, helping other older adults recognize the signs of financial exploitation. I volunteered with an elder advocacy group, using my story to help others. Each time I shared what had happened, I felt a little less ashamed, a little more empowered. This wasn't my fault. I was a victim, yes, but I was also a survivor. And I was determined to make sure others wouldn't suffer the same fate. The community response was overwhelming. Other women reached out to me, sharing their own stories of manipulation and control. Some were still trapped in abusive situations, too scared or ashamed to leave. I helped where I could, connecting them with resources, offering support, sometimes just listening as they poured out years of pain. Each conversation reminded me why I'd chosen to speak up, why breaking my silence mattered. Susan struggled with her own guilt and grief. She'd believed her father's lies, had treated me with condescension and pity, had failed to see what was happening right in front of her. We had long, painful conversations about it, working to rebuild our relationship. It wasn't easy. There were tears and accusations, and moments when I wasn't sure we'd find our way back to each other. But slowly, with patience and honesty, we started to heal. I should have listened to Emma, Susan said one afternoon as we sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd discovered Robert's phone. She tried to tell me something was wrong, and I dismissed her because she was just a kid. I'm so sorry, Mom. We both believed him because we wanted to, I said gently. He was good at this, Susan. He fooled everyone. The important thing is that we know the truth now, and we're moving forward. Moving forward became my mantra. I couldn't change the past, couldn't undo the years of manipulation and theft, but I could control what happened next. And what happened next was nothing short of a rebirth. I started small, with things I'd given up years ago at Robert's insistence. I rejoined the book club I'd loved in my 30s. I took a watercolor painting class at the community college. I went to the movies by myself, something Robert had always claimed was sad and pathetic. I discovered that I liked my own company, that solitude didn't have to mean loneliness. Then I got bolder. I'd always wanted to travel, to see the places I'd only read about in books. Robert had always made excuses, claiming we couldn't afford it, that I wouldn't enjoy it, that traveling was overrated. Now, with control of my own finances and no one to answer to, I could go anywhere I wanted. My first trip was to New York City. I stayed in a small hotel in Manhattan, spent my days walking through Central Park and visiting museums, my evenings watching Broadway shows from orchestra seats. I ate at restaurants Robert would have deemed too expensive, ordered wine without checking the price, bought a ridiculously impractical silk scarf from a boutique in Soho, and I loved every minute of it. That trip unlocked something in me. I realized that at 64, my life wasn't over. It was just beginning. I started planning more trips, bigger adventures. I went to San Francisco, Portland, Boston. I took a train across the country, watching America unfold outside my window. I even booked a trip to Paris for the fall, something I'd dreamed about since college but never thought I'd do. But the most significant change was internal. I stopped apologizing for taking up space, for having opinions, for existing. I spoke up in meetings at the volunteer organization. I called out sexism and ageism when I saw it. I set boundaries with family members who tried to take advantage of my generosity. I learned to say no without guilt, to prioritize my own needs without feeling selfish. The house, too, underwent a transformation. I painted the walls, bright colors Robert had always vetoed. I rearranged the furniture, cleared out his belongings, turned his office into an art studio. I planted new flowers in the garden, varieties he'd claimed were too difficult to maintain. I made the space mine, erasing his presence one room at a time. Some days were harder than others. I'd find an old photo or a piece of his clothing I'd missed, and the grief would hit me like a wave. I'd remember the good times, or what I'd thought were good times, and wonder if any of it had been real. Those days, I'd call Emma or Susan, or I'd go to therapy, or I'd just let myself cry until the storm passed. But increasingly, the good days outnumbered the bad. I'd wake up in my sunny bedroom, make coffee in my quiet kitchen, and feel a sense of peace I'd never experienced during my marriage. There was no one to criticize my choices, no one to undermine my confidence, no one to make me doubt my own mind. I was free. The legal conclusion came almost a year after that birthday party confrontation. Robert was found guilty on multiple counts of financial fraud and elder abuse. He received a suspended sentence with probation, mandatory restitution, and community service. He lost his license to practice as a financial advisor. His reputation was permanently destroyed. Carl faced his own consequences, losing positions and connections throughout the community. The family that had once been so tight-knit was fractured, with clear lines drawn between those who'd enabled Robert's behavior and those who stood with me. Some relationships could be salvaged with time and effort. Others were permanently broken. I felt relief when the verdict came through, but not triumph. There was no satisfaction in watching Robert face the consequences of his actions, only a deep sadness for what could have been if he'd chosen differently. I didn't hate him. I'd realized during therapy. I pitied him. He'd traded everything, his marriage, his family, his integrity, for money and control, and in the end, he'd lost it all. The financial restitution helped rebuild my retirement fund, though some money was simply gone forever. But I'd learned that security didn't come from the size of my bank account. It came from knowing my own worth, from having people who truly cared about me, from building a life that reflected my values and desires. I had enough money to live comfortably, to travel, to pursue my interests. Anything beyond that was just numbers. Now, sitting in my transformed kitchen on a bright spring morning, I look back on the past year and marvel at how much has changed. I'm planning another trip, this time to Italy with Emma. I've started writing a memoir about my experience, hoping to help other women recognize and escape financial abuse. I've reconnected with old friends and made new ones through my advocacy work. The house Robert tried to take from me is truly mine now, in a way it never was during our marriage. Every room reflects my personality, my choices, my taste. The garden blooms with flowers I chose. The walls are painted in colors that make me happy. The space is filled with art and books and memories of the life I'm building, not the one that was taken from me. I think about that Thursday morning when Robert tried to give me that pill, when I dropped the glass and watched it shatter. That moment was my turning point, my line in the sand. I could have taken the pill. I could have let him drug me into compliance, allowed myself to be erased and forgotten. Instead, I chose to fight, and that choice saved my life. I know not everyone in my situation has the resources I had. Not everyone has an Emma, a fierce granddaughter willing to fight alongside them. Not everyone has the ability to hire lawyers and therapists and rebuild their lives. That's why I speak out now, why I volunteer, why I'm writing this book. If my story can help even one person recognize the signs of abuse, find the courage to leave, reclaim their autonomy, it will all have been worth it. There are moments, usually late at night when the house is quiet, when I think about what my life would be like if I'd never found that phone. I'd probably be in a nursing home by now, drugged and compliant, while Robert lived comfortably off my money. The thought makes me cold. I came so close to losing everything. My freedom, my identity, my future. But I didn't lose. I fought back and won. And now, at 65, I'm living a life I never imagined possible. I'm independent, empowered, and genuinely happy for the first time in decades. The woman I see in the mirror is someone I recognize and respect. She's been through hell and came out stronger. She's done apologizing, done shrinking herself to make others comfortable, done accepting less than she deserves. This journey has taught me that it's never too late to start over, never too late to demand respect, never too late to reclaim your life. Age doesn't mean we have to accept mistreatment or exploitation. We have value, regardless of what anyone tells us. Our experiences, our wisdom, our very existence matter. I've also learned the importance of financial literacy and independence. Never again will I hand over control of my money to someone else, no matter how much I trust them. Never again will I sign documents without reading them, make decisions without understanding them, defer to someone else's expertise in matters that affect my life. These lessons came at a high price, but they've made me wiser and more cautious. The relationships I've rebuilt and the new ones I've formed are based on mutual respect and genuine affection. No one in my life now expects me to be anything other than myself. No one tries to control or manipulate me. And if they did, I'd recognize it immediately and remove them from my life without hesitation. I've learned that being alone is better than being with someone who diminishes you. Emma and I talk every week now, long conversations about everything from politics to recipes to the books we're reading. She's applying to colleges, thinking about studying law so she can help people like me. The thought makes me incredibly proud. My experience has inspired her to fight for justice, to stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. That's a legacy worth having. Susan and I are still healing, but we're getting there. She's in therapy too, working through her own guilt and the realization that her father isn't who she thought he was. It's hard for her, reconciling the dad she remembers from childhood with the man who tried to destroy her mother, but she's trying, and that's what matters. We're building a new relationship based on honesty and mutual support, and it's stronger than what we had before. As I sit here with my morning coffee, sunlight streaming through the window I chose, in the house that is finally mine, I feel something I haven't felt in years. Hope. Not just for myself, but for all the women who are where I was, trapped in situations they think they can't escape. I want them to know that escape is possible, that they deserve better, that they have more strength than they realize. Could this be happening to someone you know right now? Could there be someone in your life who's being manipulated, gaslighted, financially exploited by the person they trust most? Are there warning signs you've missed or dismissed? I'm asking you to look closer, to listen harder, to believe people when they tell you something's wrong. Have you or someone you love experienced something like this? Maybe not to this extreme, but financial control, emotional manipulation, isolation from friends and family. These are all forms of abuse, and they're more common than you might think. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Share your story if you feel comfortable, or just let me know you're listening, that this message reached you. Sometimes knowing we're not alone makes all the difference. And if this story resonated with you, if it opened your eyes or gave you hope or made you think, please like this video and subscribe. Not for me, but for all the others who need to hear this message. Let's make sure it reaches the people who are still trapped in situations like the one I escaped. Let's give them hope that liberation is possible, that they deserve respect and dignity, that it's never too late to reclaim their lives.